All right, guys. Hey, guys. Good to see you tonight. I hope and pray that you are well. And we are excited for part two of what we call an Unmuted with PG. This is my platform to share different things and thoughts. And what has truly been on our mind is COVID-19. We've been in this thing for a year or so, but now the new reality is, what about this vaccine? And so I'm grateful for last week. We had Brother Jacob White, who was a local person here in Augusta, and he shared some great and insightful things concerning the vaccine and those particular things. But tonight I'm excited. We got a West Coast person with us, and we're grateful to have Dr. Jacinda Abdul-Mutakabbir. I'm just going to call her Dr. Jam. What's up? How are you doing tonight?
I'm well, thank you. I'm actually a Midwestern person.
Midwestern.
I'm an implant in the West Coast, but I'm originally from Detroit. So
Detroit,
Detroit,
Motown in the house.
Awesome. West Side.
Well, listen, we're grateful to have you here and grateful for the connection, for you to come and talk to us and to share with us about the vaccine. This is powerful, especially as a Black woman, for you coming to share. We have some wonderful conversation pieces tonight as we build upon this conversation. But I want you to share yourself, introduce yourself to the Tabernacle Church family and beyond. This is global, so a lot of people are watching this, but just share a little insight of who you are. We'd love to get to know you better.
Well, I'm super excited for you all to have me here. So, yeah, as I said, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, the west side of Detroit, if anybody's familiar. I went to Howard University for undergrad, the home of our vice president.
HU, my dad and my mom went to Howard. My parents are Howard grads, so
yeah, I'm a Howard baby. Right? I went to Howard. My sister went to Howard, so, we're a Howard family, but my younger brother didn't. But yeah, so I went to Howard for undergrad. I went to the University of St. Joseph for my pharmacy degree, which is in Hartford, Connecticut. And then I went back to Howard because you don't get much better than an HBCU. And I completed my pharmacy residency there. And then I moved back to Detroit, where I did an infectious diseases pharmacotherapy and pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics research fellowship with Dr. Mike Ryback there in Detroit, where I also earned my master's in public health at Wayne State. And currently I'm an implant at Loma Linda University as an assistant professor of pharmacy practice. I'm specialized in ID, so I teach infectious diseases, but I practice in the ICU. So I get the best of both worlds, critical care and infectious diseases.
Awesome. Well, Dr. John, we're so grateful to have you. Once again, I see these HBCU connections, and so we are big up this Black History Month, Black Love Month. We got all kind of love for our Black schools, and so some of our best and brightest come from our Black schools. So once again, you are really epitomizing and sharing that. So let's jump into it tonight. COVID-19, we can't escape it. We can't get away from it. No matter what people try to do, we just in this thing. And now the latest thing is the vaccine. So gratefully now the Trump thing is over. We can focus on this COVID-19 vaccine. Talk to me about it. What have you been hearing? Last week, we had a very intriguing conversation. I kind of dealt with access. I dealt with some other issues that we've been seeing within our community. Reason we're doing this platform is I really want to challenge and share and get information to Black and brown communities. I'm very clear that we really need to do our part on that side. Now, all things up. I've had the vaccine. I get my second shot this week, and I did my research. I trusted my doctors to take it. I will admit, initially, I was in the crowd. It's too early, and that until I did my work. Until I finally, there's some people that I trusted that let me do it. So let's talk about it. So last week we talked about access, and we get into that a little bit. But there's two main vaccines out, Moderna and Pfizer. From your perspective, what are the differences? What are we seeing with that? I'm gonna let you talk about that for a little while and whatever else you want to share with that. But when people hear this, what is these vaccines actually?
Okay. So I think that these have become my favorite things to talk about. But with the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccines, they're what we call mRNA vaccines. So I know we consistently hear Dr. Fauci and everyone else talk about mRNA vaccines, but messenger RNA exists normally in our bodies. It sends messages to our bodies on specific proteins to make so that we can continue to survive. So in this case, with the mRNA vaccines, What it does is it sends a message to your cells to make the spike protein, which is significant for the coronavirus. So when your body actually makes this spike protein, it then develops what we call antibodies, or an immune response once it recognizes this spike protein. The spike protein is foreign and is not supposed to be there. So your body wants to protect you against that. So I kind of use an example of when I think about the vaccines and when we think about why you have to take 2 doses, I think of it as your parent telling you to clean your room. So that first dose is, your parents saying, hey, you need to clean your room. So it's your body sending that message, make this spike protein. You need to protect yourself against this specific spike protein. That second dose, however, is that extra boost, that extra oomph. And that's your parent saying, hey, your room needs to be clean now. So then that means that you see the spike protein again, your body then engages your immune system, and then you make this protection against this specific spike protein. So that's what these mRNA vaccines do. That's how they're utilized. mRNA technology is not new. It's something that's been used and something that has been researched since the original SARS and MERS coronaviruses that we saw 10, 15 years prior. So they began to develop and utilize this technology then, and it's just gotten more progressive as we move forward. So now here we are, in 2021, we're able to actually employ and use these vaccines. So I am a basic scientist, which means I do research on the bench. So for me, I am just excited. I'm ecstatic, about these vaccines. I think they really use just significant science to deliver the best immunity that we need to protect ourselves against this coronavirus. I think that it's also worth kind of talking about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and AstraZeneca, because those will be, the vaccines that we'll be seeing and you all may see after this conversation. So with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine, they use what we call the adenovirus vector. So what that means is they use an adenovirus, which is really like a mild cold. It's unable to cause true disease in humans. And but it acts as kind of like a Trojan horse. So your body thinks that it's actually seeing a virus, but what it's seeing is that genetic information for the coronavirus, similar to the mRNA vaccine. So it's actually seeing that spike protein. And then, as I explained previously, your body then makes protection against that spike protein, and then you're protected, against the coronavirus. So you did ask me about just kind of what I think in terms of how would I approach these vaccines, meaning that, how would I navigate the clinical studies?
Because if I heard you correctly, the Moderna and Pfizer mRNA, right?
Yes.
But you're saying the new ones coming down have a different baseline. I don't want people to miss this, because I do for a long time we keep hearing mRNA, right? And it's saying create this spike protein. I don't want you to gloss over that, because I got a lot of Google people on this platform and folk that that got that janky doctorate degree. So as soon as they hear something different, they're gonna put a implant in our arm. This is meant to. They're gonna kill all the people. Share the difference, because I don't want that to gloss over. I know you deal with this every day, but I don't want people to gloss that over, because it is a different foundational. That's why it's only one shot for the Johnson & Johnson, right? Versus the 2 for the mRNA. Can you explain that just for those who are listening to get a little more clarity?
Right. So really what governs the fact, so I'll talk about the mechanism, so how the vaccines work, and then I'll talk about why it is that we have 2 for Moderna and Pfizer, and why it is that we have 1 for Johnson & Johnson. So in terms of the actual how these vaccines work, like I said previously, Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines. So that means that when you get injected, it injects messenger RNA into your arm. Messenger RNA is very short lasting, meaning that it only stays away for about 2 to 3. It only stays there for about 2 to 3 days. Once that message is received by your cells to make that spike protein, your body never sees that messenger RNA ever again. It's in no way ever integrated into your DNA. It is very independent. It is very different from DNA. And that's how messenger RNA works. So, and then once you get that spike protein, your body then makes immunity against that spike protein, and then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, you know, you are protected. So with the adenovirus vaccines, or with Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, what it uses is, they call it a vector, or it's kind of like it uses an additional mechanism to deliver, you know, that spike protein to you. So in essence, it's kind of similar to the mRNA vaccines, but, you know, this drug company say, hey, we have a different mechanism, or we have a different way that we want to deliver, you know, this spike protein to the individual. As far as is it encoded into your DNA? Absolutely not. You know, it's not encoded into your DNA at all. All it is it's using something that is not able to cause a true virus in humans, is using that to insert the specific genetic material that will tell your body to make this specific spike protein. So it's just using that to move into your cells.
So there's different ways to do it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
It's a different vehicle. Exactly. It's almost like Moderna and Pfizer are driving this spike protein with a Honda Accord, and Johnson & Johnson is using an Acura,
a Honda.
Right? Okay.
Yes,
it's just the vehicle. It's just the vehicle, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So it's like, you know, mRNA is, so it's like mRNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, those are your Audis. That's and right. Then, or, you know, those will probably be your Porsches. And then
I like
Johnson
Porsche. I like Porsche.
The Johnson & Johnson is like your Audi. However, they both get you from point A to point B.
Okay.
So I think, you know, that's a good way to think about that.
Cool. So different companies are taking on different approaches, but they all are getting approved. For those who will say, all right, why is it one? Moderna and Pfizer was first, and now Johnson & Johnson, then Moderna and Pfizer's 2 shots, and Johnson & Johnson is 1. Why that difference? Not only is it a different vehicle, but you're saying I only had to get 1 shot with Johnson & Johnson, but Moderna and Pfizer 3 to 4 weeks.
I think that, I'm sorry about that, but I think that, you know, it becomes a matter of the way that it becomes a matter of the completion of the studies. So with Johnson & Johnson, they did a similar study to Moderna and Pfizer, and we can get into all the statistics and talking about the racial group backdowns for those studies, you know, of course, when you ask. But, you know, I think Johnson & Johnson, they did what's called a 2-armed study, or they did a study, or they did like a parallel study. So it means they looked at, you know, giving 2 doses of their vaccine versus giving 1 dose of their vaccine. They didn't see a difference. And the patients that ended up with severe COVID-19, the patients that ended up with COVID-19 at all, they didn't see a difference in the group that was vaccinated versus the group that was not vaccinated, and then the group that received a single dose in their group, and then the group that received 2 doses. Wow. So then they said, hey, you know, if we don't see a difference, then that means that, you know, we can just go ahead and give this single dose and see the same exact, you know, efficacy, or see the same exact numbers that we would see should someone get 2, which then creates that or decreases that access, right, to vaccine barrier, because that big point is, you know, sometimes people can't get there to get that second dose, or the way they got there to the first dose might not necessarily be guaranteed for receiving that second dose. So then that's where that added benefit comes in, because you only have to get 1. Okay. But with Moderna and Pfizer, they saw success increase with that second dose, which honestly kind of is a testament to how those vaccines work. Remember where we talked about, you know, it's like your parents telling you to clean your room. So that first time they tell you to clean your room, you know, it's kind of light. You know, and that's representative of your immune system. It's like your immune system is working. You know, it's seeing this spike protein, it's going to protect you, but you're only seeing about 50 to 63% protection there, right? Not that maximal protection. But when you get that second dose, your body has seen that spike protein before, it's seeing it again. So now it's like, okay, I know what this looks like. I need to protect myself against it. Bam. That's where we see those big numbers of, you know, 8 versus 162 that become infected, or 11 versus, you know, 185 that become infected with COVID-19.
let me hit you because I want to also make sure that this is as practical as possible to people, because you use some terms that we don't typically use outside the scientific world. Efficacy, right? So that's that percentage. So they say Pfizer 95% efficacy, right? Moderna 95% efficacy. But then when we get to Johnson and Johnson, that number from a efficacy point goes down. It's not 95. I'm not sure the latest. If you have that, that would be helpful. But if it's not as high as Moderna and Pfizer, why not? Even though we're hearing that it still may help against what it's called severe side effects or severe illnesses. Can you explain what that efficacy is and break that down a little bit for us?
I sure can. So what efficacy is and how they measure it is, you know, the people, does getting the vaccine work better than not getting the vaccine? So let's do a quick breakdown on the Moderna and Pfizer studies, because I always find that that's, you know, important when we're talking about these vaccines and what do they mean when they say efficacy. I thank you for actually asking me that. So when they looked at these vaccines, they did what they call a randomized controlled trial, and it's double blinded, meaning that the individual doesn't know, you know, if where they're enrolled in this study, and the clinicians also don't know where the individuals are enrolled in the studies. So, and they're random to make them fair, to make the studies equitable. So they had about 40,000 participants in both the Moderna and Pfizer studies, which I think is super important to talk about, because we always say, oh, you know, we say the studies move too fast, it wasn't enough people, but these, and I've done my research on other disease states, and to see, you know, did they have this many people into these studies? And they did not. These are like the most robust and full studies that we have as far as data is concerned. And the Johnson & Johnson data is not necessarily out and available. They haven't gone through approval for EUA through the FDA. So I kind of, you know, steer back from information I haven't been privy to. But I can really talk about these. And with Pfizer and Moderna, like I said, they had about 40,000 participants. That means they had 20,000 people in the group that received the vaccine, or a little under, and 20,000 people in the group that did not receive that vaccine. But I think it's important that we always talk about the Black people, the Hispanic people, the Native Americans, the individuals that are less than or equal to 55 years old. And why is this? This is because these are the people that we are seeing in these hospital beds. These are these people that due to systemic racism and practices are disproportionately represented in these poor statistics for COVID-19. So there were about 9.3% of individuals in each study that were vaccinated that were Black. So that means it was about 1,700 in the group that was vaccinated, and about 1,700 in the group that was not. There was about 28% that were Hispanic, meaning evenly split, 5,000 in the group that received the vaccine, 5,000 in the group that did not. It was about 201 Native Americans. And I know when we hear these percentages and we hear these numbers, it's like, oh, is this truly representative of what we represent in the United States demographics? And I don't know if we should say, you know, it's a good thing that it is, or it's a bad thing that we represent that low amount. But I mean, that 9.3% is pretty consistent, you know, with what it is we represent United States demographics. We represent only 13.4% of the entire United States demographic. So it's pretty representative there. But when I talk about efficacy, it means how many people did they see get COVID-19 in that group that received the vaccine, versus how many people did they see get COVID-19 in the group that did not receive the vaccine. So let's talk about the first dose. And the first dose, wasn't necessarily the endpoint, meaning that they weren't doing research to look at the first dose. So I always tell people it can be kind of misleading for Pfizer and Moderna anyway to look at that first dose, because that wasn't what they were looking at. They knew with their vaccine that you have more protection after the second dose. That's what they were going to require of their participants. So they focused really on that second dose. But after that first dose anyway, they saw 39 people that developed COVID-19 in the vaccination group versus 82 that developed it in a non-vaccine group. So what does that mean? About 52%. You have about 52% efficacy, meaning that you have a 52% chance of being protected, you know, should you get vaccinated.
Okay.
And then where we see that efficacy or effective that we kind of hear them interchangeably. After that second dose, we see 8 individuals that develop COVID-19 in the vaccination group versus 162 that were in that non-vaccinated group. So that means it's about 95%, you know, effective there, meaning that when you consider the individuals that develop COVID-19 in that vaccination group divided by that group that, you know, develop COVID-19 in a non-vaccination group, that's where you see that 95% effective there, efficacy there.
Let me ask you. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Did you finish? Because I had something about that. The people that argue with that, do you know what the flu vaccine efficacy is, or the other one? Because
not nearly as good.
Yes, but when people hear that, that's another thing. Because we assume that because in our minds it was so fast. But when we hear this number, 95, it's actually, some doctors told me 52% is high, Pastor. Is
incredibly
better than 0. Yeah, so we talk about these high numbers of 95. That is incredible. Even with the Johnson & Johnson, this off, we haven't got all the thing, but even if it's within the range, I'm hearing somewhere between 65 or 75, 80, that's still high in comparison to efficacy, right? I think most people don't understand the chart of what do y'all deem to be a good range in efficacy. Is there a chart for that? Is that something that y'all go over? What does that mean?
Well, Pastor, I'm really happy that you brought that up, because I think that, you know, it's important as we do get that information and as we begin to compare, when that information is made available with Johnson & Johnson and we begin to compare that, it's important that we remember we were not expecting to see this, you know, with the mRNA vaccines. It was something that we ended up seeing, and, you know, praise God for it. But this was not something that we expected to see. We would have been perfectly happy with about 70 to 80%, because that meant that we would have been able to, you know, get that herd immunity, or we would have been able to put a halt on COVID-19. So I want to say that these mRNA vaccines, really, they fall second to like the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, which we have had for decades, you know? So, I mean, this is just, and when I explain how amazing this technology is, this is what I mean. The MMR vaccine is 98%, 98% efficacy with that vaccine. And we see 95 and 94 respectively with Pfizer and Moderna. How, you know, that is spectacular. But even when we think about the flu vaccines, it's like 48%. But we still get the flu vaccine every single year. We promote getting the flu vaccine every single year. And why is that? Because if people are vaccinated, then that allows for us to have herd immunity, or that allows for us to have a decreased amount of individuals that actually do have the flu. So if we do need to hospitalize them, then that's possible because we have those beds available.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's really what it is with COVID-19, because, we see that cascade of events. We see, you know, the respiratory depression and things that, you know, have you end up in the ICU. But what we really see is that now you have all these people get it because nobody's protected against it. So then you see all these people get COVID-19. And then when you see all these people get COVID-19, they all end up in the hospital. So then when you see them all get it, we see them all end up in the hospital. Now you have no room in the hospital. Now you have to have that discussion of when do we take this person off the ventilator? So that's what we mean by, you know, 52% would have been fine. You know, 70% is fine because we have at least some type of protection. And in the event that individuals do get COVID-19, it's possible that we'll be able to adequately treat them.
Yeah. Let me shift it this way, because I think you have really explained very well, in a well-versed way, about efficacy. I want to kind of shift to something that I think we're seeing now on the news that is oftentimes causing people to really not understand what the vaccine is or COVID-19 virus is. We're hearing about all these different variants, right? So variants from London, you got a variant from South Africa, you got a variant from Compton. So all these variants, and people are probably confused. What does that mean when you hear COVID-19, the variants, and some people saying, well, is the vaccine going to be, you know, protect you against these variants? First of all, let's talk about the variants and what that means and why, from a health perspective, y'all were not shocked. This is what
Right.
viruses do. So talk to us a little bit about variants, and then we'll morph into what people are talking about with how that efficacy of the vaccines and what these variants might mean.
Okay, so variants are exactly the way that they sound. They're differences in the viruses, meaning that the virus has mutated or the virus has changed in different areas, kind of making it harder for different antibodies to bind or different antibodies to be deployed for protection. So when we talk, that's what we mean when we talk about variants. So viruses are smart. And I think it's important to know that our bodies are smarter. So what does that mean? That means that our bodies are able to account for the potential that the virus may eventually change. So what does that mean? That means that our body makes different types of antibodies. So it makes different types of protection that binds different areas of that spike protein. So just because we have a change in one area of that spike protein, and that's what these variants mean. That means that you had a change in one particular part of the spike protein. So now we identify this particular strain of COVID-19 as X instead of Y because it was a change here, and we have to make sure that we keep that change straight. So as I said, our bodies are smart. It makes different types of protection against different types of that spike protein. So while one protection may not work against one area of that spike protein, guess what? You still have 1,000 more that bind to different areas of that spike protein. So I think that's why we also, I'm not going to say knew that, the vaccines would stand up, but we predicted that the vaccines would still stand up. And that was because we know how our bodies work and that our bodies make different types of protection against different areas of the spike protein. So we knew that it would take a lot of differences, a lot of mutations, a lot of variables to really alter the way the vaccines work. But I think to put this even more into simplistic terms, what those variants mean is, or what those variables mean is, as to where, and I said you have different types of protection. So as to where you may have had, protection here, so a million antibodies or a million T cells and B cells, so different types of antibodies that can protect you. You now have a little less than 1 million. So let's say 700,000 or something of that sort. So while it may be less than what you originally started with, you still have enough to where you will be protected should you see COVID-19. I think that's important.
So because the news media is taking this and running with it. And as soon as we hear a different variant, I mean, people are just like, oh man, that means my vaccine is not going to work, and I do think there is a lot, and I will say, I'm not trying to minimize our global pandemic, but there is some sensibilization that goes on through our news media outlets concerning the thing. But like you're saying, listen, these variants, we knew they were coming in. Matter of fact, we're continuing to always update this vaccine and work on, because give me a long-term idea. If we're talking about vaccine, I said that I have these conversations. I've been championing this piece for a while. I do think COVID-19 is not going anywhere. Okay. I think that what the health systems want, best case scenario, is they get us to the place where we have developed a herd immunity through vaccines and those things. And we could potentially have to have a shot, maybe another shot every 1 or 2 years, just like we would do with the flu and others. And that y'all would like to get COVID-19 into the place where it'll be something between the cold and the flu, that if you catch it, it's not going to stop things or stop the world again. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Right. So essentially, that is what we want to see. We want individuals to get vaccinated so that we can have what's called herd immunity. And I know that's a term that we hear often, but what does that mean? That means that enough of the population is now immune to, or has been vaccinated or has protection against COVID-19 to where where COVID-19 won't have the impact that it has right now. on the community.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what we want to do when we're delivering these vaccines. But I think that it's really a twofold approach to where how do we kind of like cease fire with these variants? We cease fire by, we don't travel to other areas of the world or other areas of the country, because and this is something I always say, when you leave, you don't go empty-handed, right? Mm. And when you come back, you don't come back empty-handed. So you can, whatever they have running, and this is the same when we think about bacteria, and when they talk about, this bacteria was resistant to X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. When you go to different areas, they have different types of viruses. They have different types of bacteria that are specific to that area, to that region. So when you go there, you bring what you have specific to your region to theirs, or you bring back what they have specific to their region back to where you are. So when we think about these variants, how did they end up getting to these different places? The South Africa variant ended up in the UK. That means that somebody traveled there. That means that somebody was not protected. They didn't wear their mask. So when we talk about, variants, when we talk about this increased protection, we have to think about this as a multifold approach. This requires that we continue to remain safe, that we continue, to cease travel, that we continue to be masked, that we do that in combination with, delivering these messages to increase vaccine uptake.
Good. Let's change it, because honestly, you're here because our heart is in the Black and brown communities. I have been distressed because of how COVID-19 has affected our community. It has been devastating. Loss of life, disconnection from people. Talk to us about why this is important, that we in the Black and brown communities get vaccinated, do our part, and do what we need to get over this global pandemic. Talk specifically about why you feel, from your professional perspective, this is an important thing specifically for us Black and brown people.
Right. So I think that let's begin with 1 in 875 Black people represent someone that has died from COVID-19. 1 in 875 Black people have perished from COVID-19. That means that greater than 28% of COVID-19 related deaths have been in the Black and brown community, or have been in the Black community. Greater than 50% have been in the Black and brown communities. We have to always take into the consideration that Black people represent only 13.4% of the United States population. Hispanics, Latinos represent only 18% of the United States population. Native Americans represent 1.8% of the population. However, the deaths that we see are primarily in these groups. And yes, they are attributed to systemic and structural racism. They are. Because of this, they are those individuals that have to be essential workers. They are those individuals that drive the buses, that work in environmental health at these hospitals, that can contribute to them being infected because of different housing practices and housing laws. They do have to live together. They don't have that privilege to socially distance after they go to their essential job, which then equates to or translates to an increased amount of infection in these communities. So because of this, us knowing this, it's important that healthcare professionals and, you, Pastor, that we are here to serve as advocates to increase health, to increase equity, that being through ceasing structural and systemic racism, but also, health equity and just increasing access to care in these communities. But I think that, in the question that you asked is about vaccine uptake, why it's so important. So I explained all of these factors. And until we have seats at those tables, those factors are not necessarily in our hands to modify right now. But what we can change is how we're protected should COVID-19, as COVID-19 continues to ravage, our country, our communities. And we can control, whether we decide to get vaccinated, when that vaccine is allotted to us, when it is when we are told that we are able to get vaccinated, we can control that. And I think that is so important, to get vaccinated. And then for our younger brothers and sisters of these communities, it's so important that we continue to stay safe, that we do, we are cognizant about travel, that we continue to double mask, and we are aware of when we're around these older individuals that in these community groups, because we know that, they are disproportionately affected, by COVID-19. So I think that it's like I say with everything with COVID-19 is is multifactorial. But I think that even when we think about COVID-19 and getting vaccinated, and I always have this conversation of, I don't trust the vaccine and I don't trust this. So the reason, and I've begun, assisting with the mobile clinics. I'm the lead pharmacist for the mobile clinics at Loma Linda. The reason that I have integrated myself into this model is because I work, like I told you, I practice in intensive care. So I work in ICU. And in my ICU, we've begun to have conversations of how long do we allow this patient to keep this ventilator? What factors, is this patient one that we expect to survive? This patient has had, X, Y, and Z heart attacks. This patient has had an aneurysm. And unfortunately, once again, due to systemic, due to structural, due to health inequities, Black and brown individuals represent these people that have morbidities, meaning that they have illnesses that look like, haven't had a heart attack, haven't had an aneurysm, and having this at these young ages. So now when we are having those conversations, guess who they're about? Our Black and brown, brothers and sisters. These are the individuals that, they are having to say, maybe this person doesn't need this vent. Let's pass this to someone else that's more likely to survive. Unfortunately, if, we keep having these amount of people become infected with COVID-19, these amount of people that don't get vaccinated, these are the conversations that we will inevitably have to continue to have. So that's why it's important.
So what you're saying is either have more vaccinations or more ventilators.
And that's it. And and this is what I'm gonna tell you. I don't know if we had a space to have more ventilators. So yeah. I mean, it's that's 1 or 2 odds.
Can I tell you? All right, let me change this way, because what you said was profound, and it's one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate for this point, especially within our community. If they heard the numbers correctly, Black and brown communities, we're the higher number of deaths of COVID-19. But here's the other thing that's the trip. When you do the research, from what we're seeing now, we're the lowest number for vaccinations. That's off, right? What I need you to do is to also speak to this. There was a study done that said a lot of the older African Americans have now settled in the fact, listen, I'm gonna get this vaccine. I want to see my grandkids. I want to do this. I want to do that. So they're hearing that above 60 age limit, they're saying, listen, we're gonna get vaccinated. But there's a large percentage of younger people who said, I don't need to do it. If I get COVID, I'll survive it. I don't need to do it. What would you say to some young people? Because that's another part. I'm not having a struggle with a lot of my older people. They realize, hey, this is what it is. Unless you can talk to my grandma. The only older person, Doc, that I'm struggling with is my grandma, who we just going back and forth. And I don't know if I can ever win that conversation. I'm hoping that she'll go ahead and do it. But grandma is she, I'll just wait on Jesus. I'm like, Mom, grandma, I need to get vaccinated so I can come see you. Right. But I'm hearing a lot of younger people who are becoming very skeptical. What would you say to some young people about the need of vaccination? Why is it important for them? Even if they may not have severe, if they get it, and you're right, they may not need to be on a ventilator, and they, What would you say to some younger people today about the importance of vaccination?
I think that, and this is one thing that, and I guess, I'm one of those people that fall in that younger person group. And one thing that 2020 taught me was just the importance of being selfless, the importance of thinking of others, the importance of altruism and empathy. And I think that, it's important that we as millennials, that we don't allow for social media, that we don't allow for Clubhouse and, all of these social media applications, Instagram, Facebook, to be where our sources of information. We are in tune with adequate research practices. We have been taught them in school, and we need to employ them when we come looking for these vaccines. But I think it's important that we do have our, like you said, your grandmother, that we do have our these people that don't have this access to the vaccines, or you know, are afraid to get the vaccines and are older and more at risk, that we have them at the forefront of our minds, and that we do what it is that we need to do to educate ourselves and to make informed decisions on whether or not we do get vaccinated. I think that that's just so important. But I think that, you know, something that you talked about, and you said that, you know, your older members were resolute and they were ready to get vaccinated. Well, I find that too. And the issue really is, how do we create more equitable access? And I think that it's important to differentiate equity with equality. Equality means, you know, we all have access, yeah, but equity means that we meet the individuals that, you know, are not able to have appropriate access where they are. Meaning, how do we go into these communities and how do we deliver these vaccines? And I think that, you know, Pastor, you doing this conversation, I know before we hopped on, you said that they actually came to your church.
Yes, we were
and you were a vaccination site. And this is what is important. It's important for, you know, us as Black healthcare professionals to put our feet on the ground. And, you know, I know it's always, you know, hard because we have to do the work, but if we don't do the work, no one will. We have to find ways to go into these communities, find ways to decrease that digital divide, so we can make sure that these elderly individuals are being able to be linked to this vaccine and be able to get vaccinated. So one, we need for our younger folk to be more selfless, to be more understanding, to take more concerted efforts to educate themselves on what this vaccine is and what it's going to do, and what we need to make sure that we can protect, you know, our more disadvantaged members of our community. And then two, we need to figure out ways to create equitable access, and we need to continue to engage our Black faith leaders, as you all are essential to really helping us reach these Black and brown communities.
Absolutely. I think you're on what we said. And I was telling some people I've been really gung-ho about this because, once again, these issues structurally have been problematic. And I feel like I'm having the same conversation I was having last summer when I'm pressing these health systems. Hey, guys, we didn't create this inequity, so we need you to go above and beyond, right? We need you to listen. All right, we know you may not. Our vaccination site is really dependent on how many doses they get, right? So if they get a shipment, then we can get set up. And I said, well, I need y'all to make sure that you have a right percentage for us, that we ought to be thought of. If you're getting 100 some doses, then I need at least 40 of those, or 50. I would love 50. Hey, that's going in Black and brown communities.
At least 20%.
Yeah, at least we should be in. I agree. Equality is not what we're asking for. We need some equity in order to reach some of these, overcome some of these barriers. So I really see that being incredible. So I really appreciate that. You've been so generous with your time. Let me ask you one more question that I want you to just share what you can from a Black woman perspective, because I'm hearing that there's a lot of concerns about, all right, let's say I'm thinking about getting vaccinated. How would this affect me if I'm a woman? Let's say I'm pregnant. Should I still get vaccinated? Let's say I'm thinking about getting pregnant. Will vaccination stop me from conception? These are critical questions that I feel like Black women are asking, and they're not finding good places to get answers. So for those who are on this platform listening, what would you say to them? What are some things from a Black woman perspective that you would think, hey, here's some critical questions, but this is why vaccination is still safe in spite of some of the other things we hear about?
So one thing that I like to always say is that I am an unpregnant, woman. I have never been pregnant. I don't foresee that in my future anytime soon. So I always like to make sure that I say that, because I come from the perspective of an unpregnant woman. So this is me talking to you with my doctorate degree lens. So with that being said, I think that it's important that we once again think about the fact that these are mRNA vaccines. And not even that, when we think about the flu vaccines, of course, it's recommended that, pregnant women don't get live vaccines. And live vaccines actually contain a live piece of the virus. And what that means is that it's potential that, you know, that vaccine could travel across the placenta and somehow maybe cause some type of immune response or issue with the baby, or potentially the mother, that may alter, you know, the baby's response. And that's why we recommend, but we still recommend that pregnant women do get vaccinated. We just say don't get the live vaccine. We tell them to get an inactivated vaccine, which contains a dead, killed small piece of the virus, but it has significantly less risk of, you know, moving across the placenta the way that an live virus would.
But that's the flu. That's the flu vaccine.
That's the flu. So
yes.
So the reason that we say that with the flu vaccine, but I wanted to bring that up because guess what? They had never researched that in pregnant women. Pregnant women are what we call a vulnerable population, meaning that it is not ethical for us to go and conduct studies on pregnant women and unborn children. That's just not ethical practice. So what they said was, hey, based upon this mechanism, how this vaccine works, we believe that getting the flu vaccine would be safe in pregnant women. Of course, we've had a ton of post, you know, data. Pregnant women have been fine following the vaccine. But prior to them saying that, did they have data that explicitly said pregnant women will be fine? No, they didn't. I just want to lay that there. But I do want to talk about the Moderna study, because the Moderna study had 13 pregnant patients included in the study. And these were women that did not know that they were pregnant prior to them receiving the vaccine. So there were 7 individuals that did not receive the vaccine, and then 6 in the group that did receive the vaccine. Of the individuals that they noticed that had some type of poor pregnancy related outcome, meaning they had a spontaneous abortion or something of that sort, it was only in those individuals that did not receive the vaccine. Also, in the Moderna study, they did test the vaccine in pregnant rats, which I think is important to talk about because pregnant rats share a similar biology to humans. So what we see in pregnant rats kind of allows for us to extrapolate what would we see, you know, should a pregnant human get the vaccine. And they saw no type of pregnancy related event. And then also just kind of like, you know, doubling back and going back to how this drug works. It's an mRNA vaccine. And I talked about how, you know, it tells your body to make, you know, this specific spike protein, but not differing from a live vaccine is they don't inject you with a small, you know, a live part of the virus. They don't do that. So it's our idea that, you know, because, and then mRNA, as I said, is very easily degraded. It's just, as soon as your body receives a message, it leaves. It just leaves in your stool. It's just eliminated from your body. So, so yeah, I think that, you know, it's important that we think about that, and we take that into consideration when we think about pregnant women. We don't expect for it to do what we don't expect for it to in any way hurt the baby based upon how the vaccine itself works. However, I do think that you know, it's always important for pregnant women to talk to their provider, and the information that I'm giving you all now is just information that we always give to pregnant patients. We always make sure that we give a risk benefit, and there are significantly more benefits associated with receiving the vaccine. At the end of the day, with COVID-19, we know that it causes what's called respiratory depression, or it makes it harder for you to breathe. In pregnancy, you are already, you know, it is difficult for you to breathe as it is. So a pregnant woman getting COVID-19 could be completely detrimental. And we believe that it could be more detrimental than receiving the vaccine. So currently, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, or ACOG, recommends that pregnant women do get the vaccine. They recommend that breastfeeding women do get the vaccine. So that is the current recommendation.
Wow. Anything else that Black women need to consider, or questions to be asked concerning the vaccine?
I think that, you know, I also received the vaccine. I got the Pfizer vaccine. I think that one thing I want to leave everybody with is, you know, I'm not going to say that immunity is made without collateral damage, meaning you may potentially not feel so great after the first and the second doses, but I would not, you know, allow for that to be to cause you know, any type of trepidance or any type of, you know, fear, because what that means is your body is making protection. That means that your body is doing its job, and our body makes protection at higher temperatures. when we have a fever, when our body is at a higher temperature, you may not feel as great. You may be weak. You may have a headache, and or you may not experience any of those things. And that doesn't mean that you are any less protected than someone that does, but I think that we should remember that. And we should remember that getting COVID-19 or having gotten COVID-19 does not necessarily mean that you are protected from getting it again. We've seen people get readmitted. We've seen people come back to the hospital. And with these vaccines, we know that you will have the amount of protection that's required, against COVID-19. We do not know, if you had asymptomatic COVID-19 or if you had mild COVID-19, does that mean that you're protected in the same way as someone that has severe COVID-19? We don't know that, so it's a lot of unknowns. So if this vaccine is made available to you, get it. If you tested positive for COVID-19, if you're 10 days past that positive date, get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, this is a question that people have been asking. So if I had COVID before, I should get the vaccine. If I have any health issues, let's say cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, I need to get this vaccine. You're saying it's not going to affect those.
Right. So in regard to cancer, I get the question of HIV, and there were HIV or immunocompromised individuals included in this study, about 2.8% in both the Moderna and Pfizer studies, and they did not see any type of poor events in these patients. But as far as for cancer and for immune diseases, so like rheumatoid arthritis and things like that, I always tell patients, make sure that you talk to your primary care practitioner, whether that be a physician, a nurse practitioner, physician assistant. Make sure that you talk to them if you have any of those immunocompromising diseases that I talked about previously, so rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, because it may require a spacing of your medications. So you want to make sure that you are coinciding with what it is that they need for you to do. So that you can develop the maximal response to the vaccine.
Oh, that's great. Good. Dr. Jam, you've been so liberal with your time, and we really appreciate it. Any final words you want to say to us? And we thank you again for just sharing some incredible insight and hopefully giving some calm and some good information to people. And any final things you want to share? And once again, I thank you for being on the front line. Next week, I'm interviewing a doctor, and I wanted to do that because I do think a lot of times we need to see our faces with this vaccine, because a lot of our hesitancy is I'm not seeing somebody that I can connect with. That's why we've been really trying to be intentional about, hey, I want y'all to see someone that looks like you, that is advocating for it. That's why I'm excited for next week, as we have Dr. Mac Bowman's coming in, who's an incredible heart surgeon in our area, a member of our church, but his heart for it and understanding our communities is so significant. So I appreciate you. We thank you so much for that. Any final words you want to share to us, those who are listening?
I just want to say once again, thank you for having me too. As I said previously, it's up to us, Black healthcare professionals, Black faith leaders, to really just engage in Black and brown healthcare professionals and Black and brown faith leaders to really engage our communities and promote education. So I thank you for having this educational opportunity to promote education, to increase uptake, but to also advocate and, really fight for equitable practices. We need these vaccines in our communities. We need our community to be protected. We need for that disproportion to no longer exist. And I just want to tell everybody, continue to mask up, continue to wash your hands, continue to socially distance, protect yourselves so we can protect others. And, I stand behind President Biden. Hopefully we can get those 100 million doses out, amen. So, and I thank you, Pastor, as a faith leader, for working hard to educate and deliver this information to your congregation. It's so important that we utilize our faith leaders, because you all are our root and our best mechanisms for delivering this information.
Dr. Jam, thank you so much. Look, my mom texted me. She said, HU Bison Pride. So that's what she told me to tell you. So keep it going. Once again, thank you for the work you're doing. We're praying for you and for all those who are on the front line. And we appreciate you doing that to make sure that our underserved and underprivileged communities really have access. That's really my heart. I've been inundated with so much death concerning COVID-19. I've been really telling people this is not a hoax. we can't get tired or weary in well doing. We got to still continue to do what we're supposed to do. Mask up, wash your hands, social distance. I know we're tired. I know nobody wants to do it, but once again, that's part of loving our neighbor as ourselves, and really doing that, doing the work that we need to do. It's hard work, but it's work that I feel is necessary and is needed. So once again, Tab, thank y'all so much for tuning in for us tonight. You see the information to Dr. Jam and reach out, say thank you. We really appreciate you giving this time. We got something coming your way, just a little small thank you just for taking this time out to share with us. And for you who tuned in, share this information, share this interview. There are a lot of questions that people have. My main thing, the Bible says, in all that getting, get understanding. Don't just Google or go and see what you see as some article that has no credibility. Our aim is to give you good, credible information from the people who study this and live this and ultimately care about Black and brown communities. So once again, we appreciate you. Dr. Jam, you be good, be safe. And to the rest of you guys, love y'all much. Till next time, we'll see you next Monday for our Unmuted with PG as we talk one last time about COVID-19 vaccine. Take care. Peace.